All right, and we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PurpleTrader show. It's our first show under the PurpleTrader name. For those that don't know, we've been building for quite a bit, and that's why we've been away for the past couple of weeks. And we have some very exciting news to share on behalf of the company. So here I am with Andre Costa. So Andre, why don't you tell them a little bit about PurpleTrader and the new name?
Awesome. So thank you, Giovanni, the pug. So first of all, I would like to thank our community of users, investors, and the team that share the same mission of fostering community tokens and are helping us over the last few months to shape the vision for PurpleTrader. So essentially, what we saw over the last few months is that there are so many new platforms, community tokens and DAOs. They're helping them to issue a community token. So, like, this is a really amazing movement. And the other side of that is what about the traders? Because traders, they are a very important pillar to this ecosystem because they bring liquidity. They are actually a pillar that support the market growth. And we saw then an opportunity to help the ecosystem of traders inside of community tokens. So that's where we decided to focus and support the ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, very exciting stuff. And it's just the beginning. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about it today with who we're bringing on, which is Bo, who is I want to get Bo Zhang. I apologize, Bo, if I mispronounce it, but Bo Zhang is the head of investments at Fyde Treasury Protocol, and he has some great stuff that he's going to talk about today. I'm happy to bring him on board. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff from what he's been doing on his project, the bear market. Hopefully, you can get into some of the Ethereum merge, and then talking about the social token ecosystem. So Bo is in here. Let me bring him into the chat, and he can introduce himself. I think.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Bo.
Hi,
Nice to
Bo.
meet you.
Hey, nice to see you guys. Can you guys hear me all right?
I can hear you
Yes,
loud
we
and
can
clear.
hear.
Perfect, awesome. Yeah, I'm in my girlfriend's study at the moment. My laptop's in the shop, so yeah, working off her equipment today.
Yeah, no, whatever you got to do, to we're all everywhere. I think Andre's in London. You guys are both in London,
That's right.
and I'm in New
Yes.
York. All right. Well, Bo, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and give them a little background of what you're doing, and yeah, and in your project at Fyde Treasury.
Yeah, absolutely. So just get started with like a quick background about myself. So, started my career 8 years ago at JP Morgan in New York. Started off doing a combination of investment risk, covering ultra high net worth clients, endowments, foundations, helping them with everything from like asset allocation to treasury management to derivatives. So kind of covered the whole gamut there. So did that in New York for about 3 or 4 years, and I moved over to London about 3 or 4 years ago as well to join JP Morgan's Chief Investment Office, where I was a multi-asset PM, multi-asset portfolio manager. Traded equities, fixed income, currencies, commodities. We ran a book of $500 billion around the world of client assets, and I did a lot of their crypto research for a bit. So at a certain point, I realized that traditional finance was getting a bit stale, and I'd also been trading crypto since call it 2014. So decided to just really make the full leap over. Came to London Business School to do my MBA, where met my fellow co-founders, and we started Fyde. And now just working on Fyde full time, where I'm the head of investments. And so what we're doing at Fyde is essentially really just solving the treasury management conundrum, right, that exists in the space today. And what I mean by that is, if you think about DAO and protocol treasuries, right, call it 90 to 100% of their treasury is in their own native asset. And that makes absolutely zero sense, right? Like, I mean, that's quite literally the equivalent of like Ford or HSBC having 100% of their treasury in their own native stock, right? Like, it just makes absolutely zero sense. But it's a way that the space works today. And so what we do is, we have come up with a way for DAOs and protocols across the ecosystem to really get diversification, so diversify out the treasury. They get liquidity, right? They can actually now, access, actually use the treasury and pay for stuff with it without having to worry about downwards price pressure on a native token or loss of governance or anything like that, or slippage, right? They get yield. So if you think about, asset liability management, and super importantly, they get to do all this without having to lose their own native governance rights, which is a major attack vector in the crypto space, particularly for DAOs. And so that's kind of what we're building here at Fyde. We're working with some really cool partners on day one, guys like Merit Circle, right, the 7th largest treasury in the entire space, to really get this thing started.
No, that's awesome. I guess one of the questions I have when I was just doing a little research on Fyde is that you guys are dealing with DAOs, and if we go into, it's pretty new, this DAOs in the ecosystem. My question is, what do you personally believe is the benefits of DAOs, and why are we investing so much into this infrastructure and into these protocols like yourself at Fyde? So curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think DAOs is going to pave the way, I think, for a new type of global corporate structure. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be 5 years, down the line, but I do think that we are on the way there. And the reason why I say that is because if you think about how DAOs work, right, in terms of who gets paid and stuff, number one, it's a meritocracy in the sense that people who actually contribute, who love what the project is about, who are passionate about it, they are, they can earn the most. And there's no prejudice, right? Like, because of the fact that, a lot of folks in DAOs, right, are anonymous, they just met online, all that sort of stuff. You don't have the same sort of biases that you do with like traditional corporate companies, right? Like, there's no a discrimination if you're a woman or a guy. There's no discrimination just based on race, for example, right? Like, because half the guys have the cameras off, and like, this is, I think, the first time in the history of the world where you have somebody out in like Malaysia or Myanmar getting paid the exact same as their counterpart in New York or London. Right? This has never happened before, but like, this exists through a DAO structure because based on how much you contribute, that's how much you get paid. And so if I was an emerging market country, like, I would be all over DAOs right now. I'd be like, yes, guys, grow, right? Get that foreign capital into us.
Andre, is there something you wanted to ask? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologizes. And what else, Bo? What makes good? What makes DAOs good, and why do you feel it's kind of gonna be? Why there are so many new like smart people going and choosing DAOs over like the last 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is this sort of passion that goes behind DAOs, right? Because like, DAOs, they're a community that really just rally around a vision or a mission statement, right? If you think of like a BitDAO, right? Like, they want to create a decentralized, they want to pave the way for decentralized protocols in the ecosystem and help them grow and really yeah, and really just help them grow. And like you've got guys, I just got off a call earlier this morning with the guys from BuilderDAO, right? Like they think that there's no easy way for developers to really enter the crypto ecosystem, and so they built a community helping developers really just get into the crypto ecosystem super easily, right? Creating structures around it and all that sort of stuff. There are other DAOs out there as well, like I think it's called LexDAO, right? Which is just a group of lawyers who are like, you know what? Like, I really want to help bring my legal expertise to the crypto space and help people kind of navigate around that. And so all of these DAOs are fueled by, a common vision, a common mission. And because of that, there's passion behind it. And when you get a bunch of really smart people who are really passionate about something and you just set them to work and they can get paid based on, a meritocracy type of environment, then I think like you just have this instrument for just exponential growth, which is one of the reasons why I'm super passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that it's great to see that we're getting an influx of very smart people from all around the world. We've had the privilege to speak with others involved in different DAOs. They're India. We had someone from India, I think Africa. I forgot where in Africa though. But you're hearing they're great people to talk to. They're intelligent, and it's just something. I think it has to do this idea that it's attracting people that are that want that adventure into this new thing, and
Yeah.
At least
that's yeah. No, I mean, and not just this new thing, right? But also like being able to kind of explore the world whilst they're at it, because there's no offices, right? Like you work from wherever you have a laptop and like and Wi-Fi. And so for guys like you and me and like Andre, like we're all kind of in that age group where we want to travel the world, want to go out and see things, right? The idea of being a digital nomad is super appealing to us, and so DAOs is just a fantastic way to do it.
So yeah, no, but to add on, what are some of your favorite DAOs that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of my favorite DAOs. Well, so firstly, there's MakerDAO. So London Business School is actually super fortunate to be a delegate for MakerDAO, which is fantastic. We've been very active in a lot of the recent governance proposals. A huge shout out to actually Park and the London Business School, Blockchain Society for that. But I mean, they're like one of the OG DAOs, right? They're one of the largest in the world. They set the gold standard for what a decentralized stablecoin and algorithmic stablecoin should look like. So absolutely, they're up there in terms of my favorite DAOs. Another one is BitDAO, which I mentioned earlier. They do a lot of VC stuff, and the reason why they do it is because they want to foster the growth of the decentralized finance community. But it's also really cool because if you kind of think about it, right? Like these sort of investment vehicles, like VC and all that sort of stuff, private equity, hedge funds, etc., are usually only quite reserved for high net worth clients, right? I think in the US, you need to make over something like $250K a year, if memory serves, in order to actually invest in these hedge funds or private equity structures, or have a minimum net worth, right? So what these kind of DAOs actually enable is, again, like this is kind of like the first time that anybody anywhere can have access to the exact same investment opportunities as, the ultra wealthy, right? And like you have the same thing going on the real estate side as well, and art, right, with like NFTs and music as well, right, which is super cool. And there are a few DAOs actually that are like Moda DAO, I think, and Create DAO that are that have been launched to essentially help musicians and artists raise funding. They're still quite young, and I'm I want to see where they go, but it's quite just fascinating that this is the route that it's gone down.
Yeah, the opportunities. You mentioned investment opportunities. There's also another one, Global Coin Research.
Yeah,
that they're
BCR. Yeah,
yeah, they're providing opportunities to people that don't have that access to traditional finance, at least for now, right? I'm sure there's going to be some obstacles along the way, as there always are.
Yeah.
Which
And you're seeing that with like Securitize and KKR, right? Where like KKR's new fund is actually working with Securitize in order to actually tokenize it. But the good part of it is that you're seeing more and more illiquid assets moving onto blockchain. The downside of that is when you get a firm like KKR involved, regulators are obviously going to then step in as well and then start thinking, okay, like how do I regulate the space?
Well, that's a great transition to what I want to talk about next. Is we can't talk about the benefits without the cons, right? And I'm sure you've seen where you are at. There's probably some DAOs, maybe you haven't, but you might know that there's some DAOs that might not be structured properly. So curious to hear your thoughts on some of the cons of DAOs and maybe some tips for people that are trying to make a DAO, what to avoid when structuring these DAOs.
No, that's a very good question. I mean, the two things that jump immediately to mind, firstly, is the sort of community-driven aspect of DAOs, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that, DAOs are supposed to be super community-driven, which is fantastic, but also it's also incredibly inefficient, which is something that MakerDAO has realized, and that's why they have like a whole like a delegate process and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's something that is still like many DAOs around the world are still trying to solve, right? Like how do you balance the sort of decentralization aspect of it with the efficiency, right, that a more centralized government can provide, right? I think the stat in the US, for example, right, is that 50% of a previous president's laws get revoked when the new president comes in, right? And so I mean that's just one. I mean, and the U.S. is a very centralized, right, a body of power, but it's gotten that way through a kind of decentralized voting process, right? And so in a DAO situation, which is properly decentralized, like how do you navigate the community aspect of it without losing some of the efficiency? I think that's something that a lot of DAOs are struggling with today and are working hard to solve. The other thing I think is a regulatory side, right? The regulatory side is tricky. Like we saw the recent lawsuit from the CFTC with UkiDAO, right? Because I mean, to be fair, like the CFTC sent them like a warning beforehand. UkiDAO ignored it. They rebranded and then they got slapped with a lawsuit. But the details of that lawsuit essentially say that every participant in the DAO is actually responsible for the decision of the overall DAO. So when it comes to, who do you sue? Well, right now, apparently, like you're suing everybody, right? Like at the very least, that's what the CFTC's sort of argument is leaning towards. And so I think the regulatory side is going to be a lot trickier for DAOs moving forward. And I think it's, you need to find environments and regulatory regimes which are more friendly, right, for DAOs. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to give legal advice, but yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes about like these cons that you raised, like especially regulatory and the other points, an issue that we also see, it's about having trustable information, especially when it comes around the trader or token holder, somebody that either wants to speculate or actually somebody that wants to participate in a DAO actively. How do you see because like in PurpleTrader, we focus on both DAOs and social tokens, and how do you see this problem and how to navigate around this lack of trustable information?
Yeah, I mean, so you raise a really good point, right? Because and that's where these sort of governance attacks, I think, really come from. and why DAOs and protocol or DAOs are so worried about it, right? And like you've seen these sort of governance attacks, everything from like ENS, right, where the founder was voted out, and he had his own problems, but that was a community driven process, right, which was to vote him out. You have like all the way up to like Finance Builder DAO, like a few months ago had like a governance attack. You've seen stable coins get hacked because of governance attacks. And so, these sort of governance attacks are super, super, call it, important for DAOs to be aware of and just to stay on top of, right? So there are very few, I think, solutions for DAOs right now to kind of solve this. One of them is through something like Snapshot, right, where you kind of have like a off-chain vote and then you finalize it on-chain. So there's like a waiting period before the actual vote gets formalized and all that sort of stuff. But for investors and traders, like it's really hard to gauge, right? Like when a governance attack is happening, right? Especially if a proposal gets passed, call it 51-49, and a series of proposals go through like this, and ultimately these series of proposals are bad for the DAO, right? So it's hard for investors to actually be able to track this stuff. But I think one thing that we're doing at Fyde, for example, right, is actually on-chain analysis. And this is something that, I think will be super important for just investors in the space moving forward, is like we can actually look at all the transactions that are happening for a specific token, right? And map it over time. And so we can actually see, for example, like how centralized or decentralized is a token really, right? Like, if somebody is just telling you that, hey, like we're super decentralized, like are you really, right? Like we can actually see that on chain and quantify it. We can quantify, for example, like how much wash trading, right, or like volume spoofing is happening for a specific token. And so, on our side, like what we're actually doing is creating a series of risk scores for all of these various metrics to determine how trustworthy like a DAO or a protocol is, right? And so for investors, like that's actually super important because that gives you an informational edge on top of the rest of the market that's just trading based on, call it, crypto Twitter, right?
Got it. So essentially, risk scores and also related to how much decentralized are those platforms, which is also connected to the risk to be a security, right? Because if that token it's more centralized, it's more likely that it's not security as well. So basically, both legal and this trustworthy are risk are kind of connected in some way. Yeah. Interesting. And regarding like you mentioned about this, but how today, like you mentioned that there are a few like indicatives like risk scores. What else would be a tool for an investor or a trader that what kind of other metrics they should be looking at when it comes about trading DAOs or social tokens in general?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is the macro, right? Like, I think what we've seen over this past cycle is that crypto is very much a macro asset and it will trade based on macro factors, right? Much like stocks, much like bonds, all that sort of stuff. And so a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that's very much the case for, crypto as well. So the first thing that any investor or trader in the crypto space should be aware of is just a good understanding of where we are from the macro side of things, right? Understand what the central banks are doing, understand what's happening with inflation, understanding, things like the Fed policy rates, like all that sort of stuff. Like that's going to drive, like, call it, 75-80% of what happens from a price perspective, right? Now, in terms of like actually finding, good projects to invest in, right? Like just making sure that they have like a really solid vision that you align with. If it's something that you would actually use, right? Like, or if there's like or if you can see the use case for it, that's always good. And making sure that they have a very solid community, right? a lot of these like DAOs or protocols, for example, right? Like the community can be a bit toxic, I think, especially just given there's a lot of, I would say almost like tribalistic tendencies to stay enclosed within that particular DAO protocol, right? Like I think the beauty of blockchain and the beauty of the crypto space is that like a lot of people that I've met, right, from like a development perspective, like they're very open, right? Everyone is learning this for the first time, and so I think that's kind of the environment that really would perpetuate growth. And a product and a community and a DAO, right? And so I think like these are some of the qualities that an investor and a trader just need to be aware of. I mean, there are like obviously on-chain on-chain data as well, things like Glassnode, things like CryptoQuant, I think. So like all that stuff, like those are just tools in your arsenal, right? But the thing with relying too much on that is that, as more and more people discover these sort of trading signals, right, the less impact those trading signals have. And so you saw that with the last cycle, for example, everybody was looking at on-chain stuff, and then because of that, like on-chain just failed, right? And so finding good signals early and really latching onto those and being able to build like a trustworthy trading strategy around those early signals before the rest of the market really catches on is going to be key. Like you want to have the sweet spot where like enough of the market realizes that it's a signal and will actually trade on it, but not everyone realizes it, because then you just have people who will just kind of trade in advance to kind of anticipate the anticipation, I guess.
No, Bo, you make some great points. I made sure to write this down so I can comment on what you said. We're talking about the market. You're right. Crypto market on it. We need to follow the macro environment, and that brings the question that I made sure to write down was, we are in what some consider a bear market, right? I saw that you wrote something. I don't know if you wrote it personally, but the company did, on the current state of the market. And I wanted to touch upon that, which is, why are we here? With everything we know about crypto, why are we in this current position on the macro side? And what do you see is going to happen moving forward?
Man,
let me before just adding a point, and especially because crypto is actually a solution for where we are. Like, shouldn't we be in a better position? Like, shouldn't we be in a different position where like the stocks are going?
Yeah, so we're gonna need a lot longer than 5 minutes to unpack this, guys. But I mean, so I'll start with the kind of how did we get here, right? And so like if you think about how we got here, like all prices are just a function of supply and demand, right? And so to that effect, like inflation, the higher price environment that we're in right now, a lot of it spawned out of COVID, actually, right? So on the supply side of things, you had the COVID, shutting down supply chains, right? You had a shortage of semiconductors, you had shortage of commodities, right? You had a shortage of food, right? So those are all supply-driven issues which would drive prices higher. Then on the demand side of things, you had monetary and fiscal policy where, in the States, for example, it was basically like helicopter money, right? You get $1,000 check, you get $1,000 check. And so, you had that sort of stuff combined with ESG, which is naturally just inflationary in itself, just creating this sort of pump up of like, of higher wages, of pent up savings, right? Of infrastructure. And so you have both of these inflationary elements, both on the supply side and the demand side, working in tandem to create this sort of inflationary environment that we're in today. And of course, I think it was, I think it was back in August of last year, that Powell was basically like, nah, like inflation's transitory, guys. Like, don't worry about it, right? 3 months later, he came out and was like, nah, man, it's not transitory. We're screwed. And so, that's kind of how we got to where we are, right? And so in terms of going forward, like, look, we're in this environment now where inflation is really high, but it's rolling over, right? Like, look at things like oil prices, right? So in a developed market environment, oil prices make up around 75% of that spread between sorry, I'm getting like super technical, but like of that spread between like headline inflation and core inflation, right? So oil prices drive a lot of inflation in a developed market economy. That's rolling over. Oil was trading at, call it like $85 a barrel, right? And now it's trading somewhere around the high 80s, low 90s, I think, like for Brent and WTI. But so that's rolling over, right? You have shipping costs, right, just plummeting in the last couple of weeks. So that's rolling over as well. So you have, and now you have, call it the labor market, which is, one of the large drivers of inflation. Because of tight labor markets, you have to pay people more, which then creates a spiral of, companies now realize they can charge people more because they're paying people more. But that's starting to roll over as well, right? You had the largest fall in job openings in like the last 2.5 years, right? Come out recently, last month actually. You've had an increase in unemployment, right? You have an increase in sort of, a decrease rather in the amount of hours worked, right? So the labor force is starting to roll over as well. And so you're having all of these sort of like inflationary drivers really starting to kind of roll over. And so even though the Fed is kind of on its warpath, right? I think the terminal target rate for the Fed funds rate right now for Q1 of next year is around 4.9%. Don't quote me on that. I think it's around like 4.9%. But that means that they need to hike another, call it, 170 basis points, right, from where we are today. Will they actually do it? They're really data dependent, right? So the more the labor market breaks, the more inflation is rolling over, the less likely they will be to continue those hikes. But we need to see what happens on this front. There's usually, call it like a 3 to 6 month lag, where all of these things start to roll over, and then it actually comes through in the inflation numbers. So we'll have to see. But I mean, that's kind of where I see things going, right? That inflation is rolling over, and the Fed will be data dependent. And then, I think perhaps markets have fallen a little bit more than they really need to. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see. Now, in terms of like what you said about crypto, right? Like, why is it, crypto is supposed to be this inflation hedge? Why is it behaving like a risk asset? Well, it's the fact that, crypto perhaps could be an inflation hedge in the long run. But you have to keep in mind as well that like the majority of people who buy crypto are still retail investors, right? Something like 90% of the investors in Bitcoin, for example, are retail. And there's a map that actually we used to show back at JP Morgan to clients that showed retail timing of the market. And it was always the worst, right? They always bought at the top and sold at the bottom, like consistently. And this chart was going back to like the 1980s. And so, like the same thing here as well, right? Like the market is going to be very retail driven. And so a lot of it will just track the sort of risk on, risk off that you see with the traditional finance space. Over the long run, call it, 20, 30, 40 years, like, is this, an inflation hedge? Maybe. I mean, the math checks out that way. But, in the short term, it'll behave very much like a macro asset.
Thanks for that insightful and technical analysis.
Yeah, sorry if I dove a little bit too deep, man. It's just,
No, you did. It was really great, and that's the kind of, at the end, like that's the kind of information we need to get out there so people understand what's happening, and it's larger than just me going on the exchange and start trading amongst the trade. There's external forces that we need to be aware of, and that type, what you're saying rings a bell, especially what's going on the inflation side. Bo, that being said, Bo, I want to be very respectful of your time. If you have 4 minutes to spare, let us know. If not, you do. All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you. Andre, why don't you ask your final question?
Thank you, Bo, for stay a little bit more with us. I have one last question, which is related to community tokens, social tokens. For those that you don't know, like, could be a DAO, but it's related to communities, creators, brands like Friends with Benefits, like ApeCoin, like Paris Saint Germain. We all know like the regulatory risks, especially for brands going to space. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for other communities that are not necessarily a brand or even a sport. So I'm curious to see like how do we see this space growing over the next 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? And so there are, startups I'm seeing now that are just popping up, right? And they're essentially revolving around creators being able to sell NFTs without knowing that they're NFTs, right? But like they just know that the cash flow and like the revenue, it works its way back to the creator, regardless of how many times that one item is sold. And so I think the concept of social tokens and community tokens really like they make a lot of sense. The tricky part is the regulatory aspect of it, where and you just saw Kim Kardashian get fined, right? Like I think it was something like 1.2 million for promoting a cryptocurrency, right? And so I think with things like that, you're gonna have people like celebrities and that sort of stuff being a little bit more reserved on really marketing their individual tokens. Until there's more regulatory clarity or until their legal teams can come up with a really savvy way to kind of go around it, right? But that being said, like that's for these sort of high profile, I want to create a Cristiano Ronaldo token type of thing, right? Where people buy into it and like all that sort of stuff. But I think selling things such as images or artwork or music and that sort of stuff as tokens, right? In the sense of like NFTs, because that's a token at the end of the day, right? Like that makes a lot of sense. And that's not something that has been as regulatorily, that's a word, contested. And so I can see like, that being like a really massive growth area and like people just really rallying around those types of communities, right? For brands and like that sort of stuff as well. Like you're seeing Nike go down the NFT route, Louis Vuitton going down the NFT route. So like all that sort of stuff makes a lot of sense. The really tricky part then that for investors, right, is like how do you price it, right? Like how do you how do you determine like what the worth of something is? Is it based on traction? Is it based on trading volume? Like is it based on community sentiment? Like what is it, right? Or the growth of the community? And so that I think is something that as investors and traders like will need to be identified. But I think we have smart people like you guys who are going to solve that, right?
Well, yeah, no, Bill. Thanks for your comments on social tokens. We do have a long journey ahead, and I'm excited for it, and I'm sure Andre could speak about it for another 2 hours, but that's a conversation for another time. But Bo, like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. We want to thank you for coming and speaking about these topics. We got a lot of good coverage, and I'm excited on the content side to put it together.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for having me, and I'll catch up with you guys later.
Yeah, take care, Bo.
Thank you, Bob.
So
yeah, very cool.
Yeah, no, he brought up some great points on the macro side that makes you think about, did we hit the highest in terms of crypto prices that we might see in a long time because of the free money, as they like to say? I don't know. But Andre, I want to give you some time to wrap it up as well and have some final thoughts.
Yeah, I want to bring like a few points that he mentioned around risk, around the reputation of that particular DAO, the trust, and finally when he mentioned like how do you price this? So we are literally in the day one of this ecosystem, and that's kind of like why we created PurpleTrader. I wanted to end this telling a little bit about what we are doing, and also making an invitation. Essentially, community tokens like ApeCoin, Friends with Benefits, Barcelona Football Club, they are different from traditional crypto because they have a strong social and utility component. And over these last few months, as I mentioned in the beginning, uh, we spoke to a lot of traders, a lot of users, and the reality is that it requires like navigating in a complex crypto native application and a lot of misleading information. So it's really hard. And major crypto exchanges, they only list a few large cap tokens. So what happens is that there is a lack of easy way to evaluate social and utility aspect. As Boo mentioned, like how do you price it? Which makes traders like to miss opportunities and they make bad decisions. So that's very, very bad, especially for the growth of the whole ecosystem. So at PurpleTrader, we are on a mission to make those community tokens more accessible. So that's why we created an exchange that makes those tokens more discoverable and easy to use. So I invite you to take a look on purpletrader.io. We are on a pre-launch phase. Once we launch, we're going to have never foreseen standardized metrics so you can balance both social and financial aspects. Some curated token that it's only found in some DeFi platforms. And additionally, we currently have a Telegram channel where we are going to be exchanging information there. It's a strong network of traders, include Bo. Bo is in our Telegram channel. So if you have any question about social tokens, if you want to know people into this space, so go to our website and you're gonna see in the bottom of the landing page a link for our Telegram as well. Yeah, that's the message, Giovanni.
Awesome. Yeah, I recommend everyone to definitely come just check out the Telegram. It's a safe place to ask questions like we saw today, and learn. That's the most important thing is to learn, because moving forward, crypto, the technology is here to stay, and we want to be able to be one of those the pioneers in the space. We also want our users to benefit and have that ability to learn first, and that's what you can do if you join our Telegram. So I think that's it, right? I think
Yep.
covers all the topics today, and until next time.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care.